Have you ever had the feeling of doing everything right with your money, and yet remaining in the same place? Working every month, paying bills on time, avoiding excesses, not getting into absurd debt, and yet feeling like there's never enough money. You never make progress. You never build anything real. If this sounds familiar, stick with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you, and perhaps even disturb you a little. There's a very strong, almost automatic belief that financial responsibility is enough to prosper. That's simply being disciplined, not spending on frivolous things, and maintaining a stable routine will eventually make everything fall into place. But the reality for millions of people shows the opposite. Responsible people remain poor. Organized people remain strapped for cash. People who don't overspend continue to pay a high price every month without understanding exactly why. Have you ever experienced this? The most uncomfortable part of this conversation is realizing that the problem, most of the time, isn't a lack of effort. It's not laziness, nor irresponsibility. It's the financial behaviors we've learned to treat as normal. Common decisions, repeated on autopilot, that seem safe because everyone does them. And precisely for that reason, they are almost never questioned. Money doesn't disappear because of big, dramatic mistakes, but because of small, invisible patterns that accumulate silently over time. Perhaps you've wondered why, even earning a little more each year, the feeling of financial hardship remains the same. Why working more doesn't solve the problem. Why financial relief always seems temporary. The answer is rarely found in magic formulas, miraculous investments, or strokes of luck. It lies in daily financial behavior, emotional choices, and automatic decisions that seem harmless, but build a cycle that's difficult to break. The psychology of money explains something almost no one has told us. We don't make rational financial decisions all the time. We are guided by habits, fear, comparison, the need for belonging, and the search for immediate comfort. And when these impulses are reinforced by a system that normalizes certain choices, the result is predictable. Ordinary, intelligent, and hard-working people trapped in a financial routine that never leads anywhere. What you are about to discover may make you see these situations in a new light. And perhaps most importantly, understand that this doesn't mean you've failed. It means you've been conditioned to act in a certain way without realizing the true cost of those decisions over time. When you start to see the pattern, everything changes. Not all at once, not with miraculous promises, but with awareness. And that's exactly what we're going to start unraveling now, looking at these seemingly normal choices that, month after month, keep so many people in the same place. And as you recognize yourself in these situations, perhaps it's worth pausing for a few seconds and asking yourself, when did this start to seem normal to you? At what point did accepting to always live on the edge stop bothering you? If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has resonated with you the most so far, or what financial decision you realize you've always repeated without questioning it. It's not just about telling your story. It's about showing that you're not alone in this feeling that many people carry in silence. When you comment, you help other people see themselves too. Someone might read what you wrote and realize they're not the only one going through this. And this kind of exchange transforms this space into something bigger than an isolated video. If at any point in this beginning you thought this could be about me, liking the video is a simple way of saying that this kind of conversation needs to continue. Because the more people react, the more the content reaches those who are still feeling trapped without understanding why. And if you feel that this deeper look at money, behavior, and invisible decisions is missing, subscribing to the channel is almost like saying, keep going. Not out of empty support, but because this channel only grows when you find people willing to reflect, question, and break out of autopilot together. Your participation here is what makes this content gain strength, reach more people, and open up space for conversations that almost never happen out loud. Now, take a deep breath and follow along with me. Because from here on out, we're going to start looking directly at these seemingly harmless choices that, without making a sound, shape our financial lives month after month. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because before talking about systems, education, or context, there's a point that almost always goes unnoticed. The decisions that seem too small to matter. These choices are so common, so integrated into routine, that they rarely trigger any alarm. They don't seem like mistakes. On the contrary, they are often seen as signs of maturity, stability, or well-deserved reward. And that's exactly why they silently drain money, without provoking immediate guilt, without generating a sense of urgency. The problem isn't an isolated decision, but automatic repetition. The brain loves shortcuts. It saves energy by turning choices into habits. Once something is labeled normal, it stops being questioned. Long-term financial commitments, small recurring expenses, consumption patterns associated with emotional comfort or social status become part of a person's identity. They are not seen as financial decisions, but as part of life. And when something becomes part of identity, it ceases to be analyzed logically. There's a hidden truth here. Money rarely disappears in a big burst. It trickles away. It disappears little by little. It leaves in installments, monthly payments, almost imperceptible adjustments to your standard of living. Each individual decision seems harmless, justifiable, even responsible. The impact only appears in the accumulated amount, when the person realizes that, despite all the effort, there's no margin, no breathing room, no feeling of real progress. Have you ever felt that? These silent decisions are dangerous because they don't generate immediate pain. On the contrary, many deliver relief, pleasure, or emotional security. The brain learns quickly. This makes me feel better now. The future cost becomes too abstract to compete with the present benefit. And so a pattern is built where money ceases to be a conscious tool and becomes an emotional regulator, not due to a lack of character, but due to a lack of awareness of the impact of these choices over time. The system takes advantage of precisely this blind spot. It doesn't need to push excesses. It simply needs to normalize commitments. It just needs to transform financial decisions into something automatic, socially validated, and emotionally comfortable. When everyone does it, no one questions it. When no one questions it, the cycle perpetuates itself. And the more time passes, the harder it seems to change. Because abandoning a pattern requires facing discomfort, insecurity, and even external judgment. Recognizing these decisions isn't about self-blame. It's about seeing. It's about realizing that many choices that seemed neutral carry an enormous accumulated impact. When this realization arises, something begins to change inside. The person stops looking only at income and starts observing flow, margin, behavior. The journey ceases to be about earning more and begins to be about acting differently. And it is precisely at this point that the conversation starts to get really interesting. Comment below, "This makes sense to me." Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because understanding why behavior weighs more than income requires looking inward, not at the paycheck. The human brain is wired to seek comfort, avoid pain, and reduce uncertainty. It prefers immediate relief to distant benefits, the feeling of belonging to silent gain. When money comes in, the mind immediately tries to transform it into emotional security, something that confirms status, alleviates anxiety, or rewards effort. This happens automatically, behind the scenes, without asking logic for permission. That's why earning more on its own rarely solves the problem. If internal patterns remain the same, income only amplifies existing decisions. The brain interprets the increase as room to normalize new commitments, raise standards, and trade margin for comfort. The impact is predictable. The feeling of progress is short-lived because behavior quickly adjusts to the new level. It's not conscious sabotage, it's emotional adaptation. And the system understands this dynamic better than we imagine. Everything around us is designed to convert emotion into decision, offers that promise reward, success stories that associate personal value with consumption, contracts that dilute the cost to make the commitment acceptable. The hidden truth is that no one needs to convince you to make mistakes. They just need to make it easier for impulsive choices and normalize the absence of margin. When this becomes a cultural norm, financial behavior ceases to be a decision and becomes a reaction. There's an important revelation here. Discipline doesn't begin when you have money left over. It begins when you choose to interrupt autopilot. Mindset isn't positive thinking. It's structure. It's creating friction between impulse and decision. It's learning to differentiate emotional comfort from real progress. People who build freedom aren't those who earn money the earliest, but those who manage to act differently with what they already have, even when no one is watching and there's no immediate validation. This change isn't dramatic on the outside, it's silent on the inside. It alters how you read an offer, how you evaluate a commitment, how you measure success. The focus shifts from how much comes in to what remains. It moves away from comparison and towards clarity. This transformation has a cumulative impact because small conscious decisions, repeated over time, build something that no income can sustain alone: margin, time, and peace of mind. When that lens changes, the journey takes a different direction. You begin to see where the system pulls you, where the brain gives in, and where you can intervene intentionally, not to deny pleasure or live in scarcity, but to align your choices with what truly matters. And from that point on, the conversation stops being about money and starts being about identity, values, and the kind of life you're building without realizing it. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we understand that behavior weighs more than income, a troubling question arises. Why has this never been taught clearly? Throughout life, we learn to follow rules, to follow predictable paths, to seek stability. We were guided to study to get a job, to work hard to keep that job, and to adjust to what was expected of a functional adult. None of this is useless. The problem is that this education almost never included practical financial awareness, the kind that connects day-to-day decisions to their real long-term impact. There is a hidden truth in this process. Most of the education we receive is designed to make us efficient within the system, not to make us conscious outside of it. We learn to produce, to consume, to keep commitments, to meet deadlines, but rarely has anyone explained how financial choices shape freedom, how repeated decisions create dependence, or how a lack of margin transforms any unforeseen event into a crisis. This is not an attack on institutions, it is a portrait of the focus. The objective has always been functionality, not autonomy. Practical financial education demands reflection, questioning, and above all, acknowledging discomfort. It requires individuals to look at seemingly normal habits and ask, does this really bring me closer to what I want to build? This type of question doesn't lend itself to quick answers or ready-made patterns. Therefore, what remained was a void filled with generic advice, while real decisions continued to happen behind the scenes, guided by emotion, comparison, and immediate relief. When no one explains this context, the entire burden falls on the individual. If something goes wrong, the narrative is simple: lack of effort, lack of discipline, lack of intelligence. This interpretation is incomplete and unfair. Removing excessive blame is not removing responsibility. It's restoring clarity. It's understanding that many decisions were made without sufficient information, within an environment that normalizes certain paths and obscures their costs. From there, responsibility ceases to be punitive and becomes conscious. This change in mindset has a profound impact. It transforms shame into understanding and frustration into direction. You begin to see your financial journey as a process, not as a personal flaw. You start to realize how external incentives influence internal choices, and how small revelations can alter major trajectories. It's not about rebellion, it's about maturity. It's about learning to operate with clarity within a scenario that has never fully explained the game. When this lens adjusts, something changes in the way you observe the world around you. Commitments cease to seem inevitable. Comfort is no longer confused with progress, and status loses some of its power. Awareness begins to occupy the space of the automatic, and this paves the way for decisions more aligned with values, not just expectations. It is at this point that the journey gains depth and meaning, preparing the ground for different, more intentional choices that begin from the inside out. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because after understanding the context, the behavior, and the behind-the-scenes aspects of this cycle, something emerges that changes the tone of the conversation. The realization that there is a way out. Not a miraculous way out, nor an instant turnaround, but a real, possible, and silent first step. And this step doesn't begin with making more money, nor with radically cutting everything. It begins with awareness, with the decision to observe before reacting. Awareness is pausing the automatic. It's realizing when a choice doesn't stem from necessity, but from habit, comparison, or emotional relief. It's noticing how certain decisions are repeated month after month without ever being revisited. This perspective changes everything because it removes money from the realm of guilt and places it in the realm of intention. You Begin to see where it's leaking, where it's weighing you down, where it's trapping you, and only what is seen can be transformed. Creating room for maneuver is another important revelation of this journey. Room for maneuver is not a luxury, it's space. Space to breathe, to make better decisions, to avoid being pushed by manufactured urgencies. Without room for maneuver, every choice becomes a reaction. With room for maneuver, choices become decisions again. This doesn't require complex formulas. It requires a certain attitude. It requires accepting small discomforts now to avoid great pains later. It requires exchanging external validation for internal tranquility, even when no one is applauding. Stopping automatic behavior doesn't mean living in deprivation, but in alignment. It means asking more often, does this serve the kind of life I'm building? Or is it just a temporary relief? This simple question carries a huge impact because it shifts the focus from the short term to the long term, from impulse to intention. This is where the mindset truly begins to change, not just as talk, but as daily practice. This first step doesn't solve everything, and that's precisely the most honest part of the process. It paves the way. It creates clarity. It inaugurates a new way of relating to decisions that previously went unnoticed. The transformation happens in layers, with small revelations accumulating. Each conscious adjustment slightly reduces the price paid every month without realizing it. Each more aligned choice strengthens the feeling of control and direction. When you understand that you don't need an external event to begin, something settles inside. The journey ceases to be desperate and becomes intentional. You begin to realize that financial freedom is not a distant destination, but a set of well-made decisions along the way. And the deeper this awareness becomes, the clearer it becomes that there is still much to be discovered in this process, because observation is only the beginning of a change that is built little by little from the inside out. Comment below. This makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because this conversation touched on some real point in your own journey. And that's exactly why this channel exists. To look calmly, without magic formulas, at decisions that almost no one explains, but that impact everyone's lives. If this type of content helps you see money, behavior, and choices more clearly, subscribing to the channel is a simple way to continue this exchange and follow reflections that follow the same line. If you'd like, leave a short comment below, just so I know you stayed until the end. It could be something like, "This message was for me," or "I'm with you until the end." These comments create a real sense of community here and show that this conversation is reaching the right people. And if at any point in the video you recognized yourself, liking the video is a silent way to reinforce that connection and help this content reach more people who also need to hear this. There's a video over there that perfectly complements this topic and delves even deeper into this perspective on money, decisions, and behavior. Click there and continue reading.